All right, well, I'm Eric. For those of you guys who don't know, Eric Ghiaciuc. I'm the owner of this sawmill, and I work with the park and help them with this course. We came up with the idea around this course. It's pretty cool. I think it's exciting. It's different than anything they have on their course offerings. So just today I want to go through a couple bullet points about the whole process, and so really, I'll answer all the questions as best I can. I would say we'll probably try to, because of the late start, hold the questions to the end if I don't, or I can stop at while we're talking about certain things as far as the process and things like that. But one of the first things that I want to touch on before we get to the mill stuff is, excuse me, try to be professional. I'll write this down. But so log selection and acquiring logs. So part of my business plan was trying to acquire logs and make sure that I have logs that are usable, sawable, and then trying to get them clearly as cheap as possible. So a lot of what I do is I talk to the tree services and make sure that, ask them if they have logs they want to get rid of or logs that they have coming down. And a lot of times what I do with a few tree services is I will go with an empty trailer and they'll load me, because then they can go to the next job and save about half the time. They can do twice as many jobs sometimes in one day, and I get free logs. Sometimes they'll drop them off, and in the past I have cut the logs. The problem with cutting logs is, in a business plan, you work twice as hard for the same amount of money, because at the end of the day, unless they pay me to cut them, I cut them for free, and then I bring them here, and then I saw them, and I've worked twice for the money it takes just to saw the lumber. So I don't do that as much anymore unless it's a family friend or somebody in need, or it's a rare tree, for example. So try not to do that. Part of the log idea for me in sawing good logs is, one, they need to be straight as best as possible, as much as possible. They need to be straight. The other part of that is I used to get really hung up on how big they were, and that's really, I would say the best word, it's overrated, because I look at logs now and I'm like, how straight is it? Okay, that means I have the least amount of waste possible. A straight log, you don't waste as much. And to me, that's a lot bigger than having a log that's huge, great, big, black walnut, but it's got a nice hook in it. Well, you can only do so much with a log that's got a grain that goes, in a nice bow. You can really only do so much unless you're gonna make big slabs. And even then, we're gonna make big slabs. And I'll touch on how I would cut them later if I had a log that had a nice hook in it. We'll get to that later. We can discuss that while we're cutting. But as far as that's concerned, the biggest thing for me is making sure a log is straight, and making sure, and part of being straight is I mill cedar telephone poles, and they have a nice taper. So I really only get as much material out of that as the small end is going to give me. Past that, I can take the cutoffs and remill those. But it becomes a bit labor intensive, so I try to avoid that as well. But it's about being straight, and then every once in a while I get a couple good logs, a couple good trees that are fat and straight and make a bunch of lumber. So that's always really nice. Hold on. Excuse me. Make sure I cover everything. So getting the logs to the mill, that's one of the other things I wanted to touch on. So as you can see, I have a trailer, and the biggest thing is people are like, well, can you cut the trees down? It's like, I can, but I have to charge you. Otherwise, I'm working for free. The other thing is, well, I don't have a loader. I don't have anybody to get the logs on your trailer. So, okay, well, that's become a no-go for me, just because if I have to bring my equipment, I have to cut the tree, then I have to make multiple trips to get my equipment back to the mill. It doesn't financially make sense for me. So, and I'm just speaking on things that have become issues for me and that I want to make sure that I covered. But a lot of times I'll pick up logs from people that have the ability to load, or a neighbor has a tractor, or the tree service will call me and say, hey, do you want this? Do you want that? Sure, great, that'll work out. So I do those things, and I've, as you can see, acquired plenty. Half this pile, as you're looking right over here, is a customer, and the other half is going to be logs for sale. So part of that's for a customer. And as you can see, if you guys just peek over at these logs, a lot of oaks, a few pines, a lot of that is going to be waste because of the way that those logs are. They're not the most ideal. A couple small ends, a couple crooked pieces. I'm going to do the best I can with the logs that he gave me. However, A lot of times people will bring you logs and they're like, oh, I'm going to build this whole big project out of all these logs. Well, excuse me, you end up giving them the best product you can out of what they gave you, but that doesn't always end up being what they had hoped for a lot of times. So having said that, I always try to be real honest with people up front and say, hey, listen, this is what the logs that you're giving me are going to be able to, you're going to get about 60% of material in return. You know, you're going to get about 15% waste, which is normal on even perfect logs. 15% waste on cutoffs and things like that. But certain logs don't do as well just because they have a crotch in them, they have a hollow spot, they're too short, or they, just the nature where they grew, you know. So I always try to be honest up front with people about their logs. But as far as getting them back here, like I said, I have a trailer. Tree services help me out. Sometimes they dump. Things like that. So as far as the mill, what do I have next? Yeah. So,
when you talk about milling the logs, is there any issue with when you're supplying the lumber, like certification of the lumber, if somebody wants like a timber, or if they're going to use it for construction, and is this a sound timber? Does anybody get into enforcing any of that?
as far as grading the lumber, that's out of my hands. So my role, like if I was part of a billing process, my role is simply for supplying the lumber. Now, if somebody has to, don't quote me on this, I know that some townships may require grading of your lumber to build a home. I have heard of that before out of state. I haven't really heard much about that in state. I'm not a builder, I'm not a carpenter, I just produce lumber. I've built plenty with what I've milled and I've never had any problems, but that doesn't mean it would be grade specific for certain things. I can tell you that what will affect a grade on lumber is your practices, your habits. So let's say that you stack and sticker, and I'll get to, well, stickering is, some of you probably already know, stickering is the process in which you put small, 1-inch pieces between your lumber and you stack accordingly, leaves air in between each one, side to side. You're letting air get around to all sides as much as possible, and you stack it up to a certain size, and then you're stacking lumber into a bunk, per se. So having said that, certain practices that will degrade lumber is leaving them out in the sun, out in the weather, or not stickering them, just leaving them in a pile. Have you ever pulled lumber off the rack at Home Depot and you're pulling pieces out? I'm laughing because I feel like we've all done it. You pull the pieces out, you're like, oh, that looks good. You get it home and it's like, or you're just going, oh man. Or you're pulling off the rack and going, you're looking at it go like this. Well, they don't dry theirs and they don't sticker theirs. They bundle them, ship them down the road on a truck uncovered or covered on the top to avoid sunlight. They put little spacers in here or there. That's their method of drying lumber as it goes down the road in transit. So not everybody knows that. I've had Home Depot employees tell me that. Anyway, leaving stuff out in the sun, not stickering it. Cut selection can affect the grade on lumber. Like if you want perfect lumber, you're gonna make sure that all your habits are good. So for example, picking the best logs possible, as straight as possible, no knots. Making sure all your cuts are consistent as far as the thickness, making sure you sticker them appropriately and in the same fashion every time, making sure there's either weight on the top or they're bundled appropriately out of the sun and out of the elements. They don't have to be completely out of the sun, but if you're gonna air dry them, you wanna make sure they're stickered and all the spaces are the same and they're stickered properly with tension or weight, per se, and that should help keep your grade up higher. That's as far as grades are concerned, that's about as much as I know because I don't deal with grades. But yeah, like I said, some townships may require grading, and I know that there are people out there that do that. Some grade the logs, some grade the lumber. I've heard of both, but to be honest with you, that's not in my area. Don't have a lot on that one.
There's nobody been out here that's saying, hey, you can't sell this because it hasn't been graded, so they can't answer my question.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Okay, yeah. So on to the mill itself. So this is a Cook's saw manufacturing. They built this. It will saw 26 feet long and about 44 inches wide. My cut depth is about 8 inches. Can't go any farther past that because of the size of my band wheels. To get the width I wanted and to get the length I wanted and to make it portable, this is the setup that they had to give me. So far it's been great. I have a computer on this mill. It's pretty, they call it this like a simple set work style. I don't have, it's one function at a time. You set it up, you program it, and it'll do one function in a repeat fashion via the controls in the computer. You have to zero it every time before you start your milling process, so the computer knows where bottom is. And then past that, it's fully hydraulic. There's 8 drop legs. It's a diesel drip. It's a diesel motor. And over here, you guys can see the log. So this is what we call the log deck, is all the flat spots on which the logs will sit. This is what we call the log deck. This is what you would call the mill head. And then this is obviously would be your log loader. So some people call them log dogs or log spikes, but the clamps, I just call them clamps. They're on the other side. You'll see those when I start up and start running. The log stops, which are not up yet, if you guys can see them. They're right here. Those are also fully hydraulic on a lever. The log turner, I have 2 of them. One is down about 6 foot from the end, and one is right here in the middle. So my mill is set up in a way that you try to split the log with the log turner, and then that will put you in range of the log stops and the 2 log clamps on the back. So majority of the logs I mill are all right here in this fashion. Occasionally I have to use the second log turner and the 4th log stop at the end, which is kind of sticking up right now. You can see that one. That's about it, I think, for that. Yeah. So to this point about the mill itself, does anybody have any questions?
How long have you had the machine?
I've had it for almost 3 years now. So yeah, almost 3 years. When I got the mill, I didn't start for the first 2 months I had it because I didn't have it under cover. I left the tarp on it and said I am not getting started until it's out of the weather. So I'm glad I did it, but sacrificed a lot of time, but I'm glad I did it because it's, I don't have rust on it very much anywhere. So does anybody else have any questions about the mill itself?
Is it here full time then? 365, you leave it here during the winter?
Yep. Yep, I mill year round when I have to. Obviously when it gets real cold out, I try not to mill too much because cold weather is iffy on hydraulics. I don't like to, the skid steer is getting old and it doesn't like cold weather. So, but in general, if I get it warm, take my time, milling in the winter is fine. Milling frozen logs is actually really nice. Keeps the blade really cool, blade lasts longer. So I don't know if you guys can see it right now. I turned it on because I thought I was going to start up a little bit sooner, but inside of the mill head here, I have 2 drips that keeps the blade cool, lubricates it. They're diesel, so because that has the best lubricating properties across the blade. Inside the mill head, the band wheels, I know you guys can take a peek here in a second when I start up. You'll see it as the mill goes back and forth. Is I have 2 roller guides. They're greasable bearings. That keeps the blade where it needs to be. They're both fully adjustables. They're 8-way adjustables, so I can go up and down, and I can tilt 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different ways. Like it's really nice. I can put the blade guides exactly where I want to, left, right, up, down. I can tilt them, move them up and down their axis. It's really nice. It works out really well for me. Chain up and down via hydraulic motor. What else?
I'm sorry, what did you say your lubricant was? You were using
Diesel fluid.
fuel? Oh.
Yep. It's probably one of the most common lubricants that people use with bandsaw milling that I'm aware of. I know that some people use water and pine sol. I know a lot of people use that on pine, on softwood. They say it helps keep the pitch off the blade or break it down as you're milling. However, I've had really good luck with the diesel, and that's all that I've used. I know some people use water and windshield washer fluid. the type that melts ice in the wintertime. I've heard people using that as well. I know some people use just straight water. Water will steam off and boil off real quick if your blade gets hot enough. It doesn't stick to the blade very well. So past that, before I start up, does anybody have any questions?
Looks like the carriage is chain driven. What's that cable that's running across the back top?
That supports the hydraulic hoses over here. So if the mill is, let's say I make a 26-foot pass on a log, like on one of those telephone poles right here, if I put that on there at 26 foot, the blade will literally stop and it won't even leave the wood. It'll break out at the end, and then I have to pull the board off manually. But I can do a full 26-foot pass. But that cable right there, the stainless steel cable, will carry the hoses all the way to the end of the mill. Can you see it? Do you see the hoses bunched up over here? Yep, you know what I'm talking about? Okay. So that's what that's for. Hydraulic tank back here runs transmission fluid. Valves for hydraulic, all your hydraulic fittings are right here. Ignition. It is a very simple machine. So it's simple, but it's not. There's a lot to it, but it is still pretty simple. So you've got your motor, you got your basic drive shaft, for lack of a better for lack of a better term, you have your drive shaft, and you're running a belt over here to your drive wheel, drive pulley on the other side, and this powers your hydraulic pump and your hydraulic fluid, which takes care of all the hydraulic motors on the mill itself. So pretty simple. This lever engages it. Okay. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So some of you can see it from where you're standing or not. I have log scales on the side. So they call it sight sawing. So once I zero the mill, the mill will not go down past a 1 inch cut. So if I'm all the way at the bottom, that's where I tell the mill it's at 0 when I hit the computer, which is necessary every time I mill. If I want to use the computer settings, I have to make sure the mill is down all the way, and I put 0 into the computer so that way it knows that it's at 0. But that 0 will make a 1 inch cut every time. So as long as the mill is all the way down, it will make a 1 inch pass. And the reason that you can't mill down thinner than 1 inch is because of clearing the log stops. So these are you have log stops here that are hydraulics, then you have these log stops. They actually will put a little groove in the wood, and it'll stick itself. This little triangle it'll pierce the side of the log cant, so the log cant can't come up or roll out. I think that's about it. So, well, let's get started up. Question?
If there's nails in the logs.
Okay, yep, good question. So I don't know if you guys saw, I pulled out 1, 2, 3, about 6 of them out of these, because these are actually cedar telephone poles. I think I may actually have one left in there. I have to clear on the other side. But if I hit one with a blade, a brand new fresh blade, real small, because a lot of times they'll have some staples in there. Like you even see trees in somebody's yard, like somebody's grandma wanted to put up a birdhouse, put a nail in the tree on a limb, and then you're milling it. Well, no one ever takes the nails out. So a lot of bigger sawmills won't touch a yard tree. Let's say you've got the most beautiful black walnut. If it came out of your front yard, they won't even touch it. Because to sharpen their round blades, carbide tips, it takes somebody, I don't know, a half hour to an hour, and they have to pay them to change those out. And then it costs money to get them replaced or resharpened. So they don't even touch them. A lot of bigger sawmills won't touch those. I deal with headache. I might, in an average order, I'd probably ruin or have to take and get resharpened. And after you hit a nail, there's no guarantee that that blade doesn't have stress cracks, and that there's no guarantee it's not junk. But what I do, because blades are about $40 to $50 a piece, depending on what you buy, I get them resharpened and I run them until sometimes they just break. And it's unfortunate. It kind of scares me every time. But that's one of those things where if you hit a nail, you can get it sharpened and keep using it. You can get a few more runs out of it, or you can toss it in the pile. So I just choose to keep running it. I get them resharpened and keep running it. So
Do they make metal detectors that you can go up and down, or is that just a pain in the road, or is it?
No, I have one. And when I'm thinking about it, I do it. But it's also one of those things where if I took every log and metal detected it, cleaned it, made sure everything was perfect, made sure that my ends were perpendicular to the grain in the wood, so that way when I'm bringing the log back, that's something I'll show you guys in a second. If I was bringing the log back with the board return on the mill head, I want to make sure the thing was perfect before I saw it, because it's going to make the sawing process quicker, more efficient, easier. However, if I take time on every single log to wand it, power wash it, make sure it's perfectly clean, make sure the ends are perfectly perpendicular, that's a lot of time that takes away from the actual milling process. So depending on the quality of the logs, I do my best. And if I think there's metal in it, I usually run the wand over it. I do the best I can. But also at the end of the day, sometimes it's about just getting the job done. And I have a bunch of blades. And a lot of times I just put a new blade on and keep running. So
Does the wand pick up on aluminum working nails too?
any metal, yeah, any metal, yep. Yeah, it'll do metal, it'll do aluminum, stainless, it'll pick it up. I have what they call a log wizard, pretty good piece. I know a lot of guys, I've seen guys use the handheld metal detectors that they wand the ground with. Those work pretty well. I have seen, I don't even know what they're called. If you've ever seen anybody get wanded as security before they went into an establishment, like a restaurant or a club or whatever, I haven't been one in, I don't remember when, but they'll wand you to make sure there's a metal, right? I've seen a lot of guys use those too. And they look just like the wand that I have. They almost look identical. So I think they all work pretty good as far as I understand. So I'm gonna go back to stickering. So I just stickered that pile real quick at the end of the mill so I could get it off, because I wasn't sure where anybody was gonna be standing. I want to make sure everybody had a chance to see. So if everybody peeks over there at the end of the mill, you can see that's what I mean when I say stickering. So you have space between the boards as they're laying down. You get space between each board. And you've also got, those are just furring strips from Home Depot. To be honest, they work really well. They will stain your wood depending on the species. If you're using pine, if you're stickering pine, they won't stain. Any of the hardwoods, they'll probably leave a little bit of a mark, but most of the time that sands out or planes out, and most people don't concern themselves, that's not an issue. So yeah, that's the stickering process. I want to jump back to the mill head real quick. You'll see me use this when I fire up and start running, but these right here, they're the board returns. So what happens is this goes over the log, and excuse me, when I clear the log cant, it drops. The mill head will pick itself up via the computer setting, and when I hit the return button, these pieces down at the bottom will bring the board back to me, and I can take the board off the end of the mill, bring it over and stack it right away. So that's a really nice feature on a sawmill, because that means that every time I make a pass, I don't have to either have somebody grab the wood off of the mill for me, or I have to walk around, grab it, take it off, and bring it back. So I used to have to do all that manually. It literally saves me probably 20% of the time it would if I didn't have it. So works out really well. So
Something you said on the blades. How is dirt? When you got dirty logs or in your bark and all that, does that tear up the blades pretty bad, or is it? Do you worry about power washing it, or just cut right through the bark?
this is a very efficient way to get the worst of the worst off the log. I don't have water out here. It would be great if I had water, and if I had the ability to, I'd power wash more often, but I don't. So if the log is pretty dirty and I want to get some of that stuff off, I just use the brush as best I can, get most of it off. But if the bark is loose, depending on the log, so if you look over there at that piece of elm, those couple pieces of elm that Brad's standing next to, if you look over there, some of that's coming off. So depending on what it is, if it's sat long enough, like cottonwood will shed its bark. Let cottonwood, cut it green, stack it in a pile off the ground. Cottonwood will shed its bark. It won't just fall off, but it'll soak up water and it'll expand and it'll pop off the heartwood or pop off the log itself. And you can take it and you can pry that stuff off. I have a bark split over there I can show you guys in a second, and it will take the log off, but most of the time, depending on the age, how long it's been sitting, you can do this with a lot of your logs. Now, the second you cut it off, let's say you cut a tree down, you put it straight on the mill, that bark's probably not coming off right away. It's gonna be stuck, it's gonna be difficult. But as far as Like that, for example, like black walnut's the same way. It'll sit there. It's similar in reacts with the same behavior as cottonwood. You can take the bark off black walnut in a couple weeks, a month. It pops right off most of the time. Now it's a little bit tougher, but it does do the same thing. So anytime that I have a cottonwood log or anything that's got bark that's loose and I can get most of it off, I do, because then that way the blades will last that much longer. So, and a lot of times if I have dirty logs that have a lot of bark on them, I'll take the time, if it's a nice log and I'm gonna get a good yield out of it, I'll take the bark off as much as I can. I'll spend the extra 5 or 10 minutes and pry as much off as I can. And so let me grab one of those and I'll show you, because you asked the question. So this is just a bark spud. It's a pretty simple tool. A lot of the tools that I have around here are pretty simple. Been around for a long time. Oh, I have another one over there somewhere. Pickaroon or a hookaroon. It's got a goofy name. It's just a big hook and goes like this. I can grab a log in the middle of the sawmill and roll it with one hand, and it's really nice. I don't know where that one went, but so this is a barking spud. Excuse me. Pretty simple. This is obviously pretty dry, but like, you don't want to make a habit of having to do every one of these, but it is pretty nice. It does take a lot of this stuff off, and if you feel the need to take the bark off, it does work pretty well. So I try not to do that to every log, but depending on the log and depending on the situation, if it's dirty, I definitely try to use the brush. But if any way possible, and the log is dirty, I always try to use the bark spud to get it off, because then I've got it even better than just getting the dirt off of it. So, all right, I'm going to, yeah, sure.
How do you get rid of all your sawdust, and do you anchor seal your end grain, or do you just process it? You don't have to do that.
Well, a lot of times the sawdust just kind of blows away, to be honest with you. Unfortunately, I'm not saying I don't take care of it. A lot of it ends up in that pile right there. As you can see, I have pretty decent pile building up over there. What a lot of people do is if they're, because I have a dirt floor around here, if I had concrete everywhere and I was milling a big run of like pine per se, I would call horse people. Anybody that owns horses or boards horses, they'll take pine sawdust and they'll use it on their horses. Now, I don't know for a fact if they can use hardwood sawdust. I know that horses are allergic to certain species of trees. I do know that for a fact, or plants or something like that. But I do know that I used to be in a business where we manufactured softwood pellets, softwood heating pellets, but they would also use those same pellets for like animal beddings, like goats, anything that has to be boarded in a barn or has a stall. Like you can use those softwood heating pellets for that. They work really well, soft on the underside of their hooves and things like that. So I do know that they use the softwood for that purpose as well. A lot of people will come by. I know other people that do only softwood milling, mostly pine species, and people will come and take as much sawdust as they can, and they'll throw it in drums and take it to their farm, and that's it. So a lot of times mine ends up at the wood processing place or in the pile. A lot of times it just blows away. Sorry, Lauren. Yeah, oh really? My dog loves to dig around in it, I know that. So does anybody have any questions before I start up and show you guys a little bit?
How dry does the wood have to be?
It doesn't have to be dry. In fact, I'd rather mill a green log than a dry log. The blade won't heat up as much, it'll last longer. So the water in the wood will act as an extra lubricant. I'd much rather, if I had my way, I'd mill every log wet and frozen. The blade will last longer, it'll hold its edge better. These are great, but they don't, the saw blades don't like them. This is a cedar telephone pole and cedar telephone pole, and as you can see, this has got a lot of the treatment on it. And it's fine, because what happens is I mill all of this off, and then this one here, you can see it doesn't have as much, but the saw blade does not like that. It definitely wears it out faster.